Hi y'all, this is my reflection video and I'm gonna focus on task 6, 8, 9, 10 and bonus only because those require me to create unit testing, which I think you would be interested in hearing. Um, but don't worry, I passed all the other tests. um, for task 6, create a list with sorted by amount. So I just use sorted provided by Stream API and pass in the get amount as the key and return a list, a sorted list. For the unit test, what I did is basically I take the last 10 transaction after sorted in Excel, last 10 transaction and their amount right here, and I put in as the expected value. So and then I call my function, and with the index, the last index, the second to last index, and so on to the 10 to the last index. And if they all match, then the test pass. So right here, okay, the test pass. For task 8, produce a setup string of customer ID who have equal or higher number of fraudulent transactions. So we gotta pass in the number of fraudulent transaction, um, and I create a hash map to take in the ID, that will take in the customer ID and the number amount of time the transaction that associated with the ID is a fraud transaction. So iterate through all the transaction, check if the transaction is fraud. I add the customer ID in and I increase the increment the count. I use ghetto default because at first um, the default value will be 0, and then you add in the ID and it would be increment by 1. And then because they want we want to return a set, I create a new set and iterate to the map and check if the value is greater than the number of the passing fraud transaction. Then we add the customer ID into the set and return the set right here. So for task 8, what I did for unit test is I use pivot table of Excel. So if you if you can see right here, hold on 1 second. So you can see right here, I pass in 141. So it's mean like I only return a list with the number of customer that have more than or equal 141 fraud transaction. So according to the pivot table of Excel, only one customer has 141 transaction. So the expected value is we return 1, and I also put it right here. The expected customer ID will be this one. So C 127.127.551.551.8867. Yes, and also I create another one which is 108. So it's mean the customer with more than or equal 108 fraud transaction. So right here, so it's one, two, three, four, five, six of them. The expected value is 6 of them, and I can test right here and test A right here. Yes, all pass. And 9 and 10 are pretty much similar to 8. 9 return a customer ID with number of fraudulent. So it's the same thing, iterate through the transaction, add to the map, and increment the amount, the number of time the transaction is fraud by 1, and the hash map. For number 10, um, same thing, but instead we add in merchant ID and the amount of money of the fraud transaction. So same thing, we add the merchant ID in, but instead of increment by 1, we increment by the get amount to get the total amount of money of the fraud transaction. So for task number 9, I do the same. I also utilize the pivot table. So if we pass in the customer ID of this one, and you can see right here 65 fraud transaction. And if we put it right here, oh no, okay, as you see right here, for this one expected value should be 106. So that's how I make my unit test. And same thing for 10. um, make the transaction and use a pivot table to get the expected value. So that is my for the bonus task. I will talk in a different video.